seekers come together, searching for the way, guided by the Spirit shining every day. Voices call from Zion.
Well, once you debunk the debunkers, there's nothing left, right? You can just cut it short. In this presentation, I'm going to talk about Native American ancestry. And in particular, I'm going to give some DNA insights that, together with the Book of Mormon, reveal some insights into Native American ancestry, taking the Book of Mormon and the DNA. Now, those are two legs of the stool. What's missing is we need a little bit more of the Native account from your own history to kind of fill in and further flesh out the Native American history. So you should view this as a work in progress. You should view this as the best model that I have proposed related to the populating of the Americas and what we have about Native American ancestry. Okay. We're going to cover three basic points. Those will be that we can identify likely DNA for Native American ancestors through help with the Book of Mormon. Of the Native American ancestors, it's my opinion that the ancient Hopewell population that was in Eastern North America at the time of the Book of Mormon, that fits those Book of Mormon timeframes, best fits the ancestors described in the Book of Mormon. Another thing that we'll find is that there were others in the Americas at the time, and the DNA evidence shows that the people intermixed throughout the Americas. I'm going to break it into four parts. The first part, I'm going to go through my proposed model related to populating the Americas. That part might take 15 minutes or so, and then we'll have a few minutes talking about my proposal for Lehi's DNA. And I'll spend another maybe 5 or 10 minutes on some newer DNA evidence that should cover it. Okay, so my proposed model for the populating of the Americas, I'll pick up prior to 1000 BC. All right, at that time frame, in my opinion, there were two significant populations in the Americas. In the Mesoamerica area in Central America were the Olmec. The Olmec start around 1400 BC. All right, there are some that have thought, well, maybe the Olmec or the Jaredites. It's my opinion that they were not. So the Jaredites, in my proposal, would be in that northeastern North America area. The Olmec were separate and at the same time in Central America, and then throughout all the periods we'll talk about, there were small hunter-gatherer groups that existed throughout the Americas. When you do the archaeological research for Native Americans, are finding small populations, little villages throughout the Americas. But I'm talking about two significant civilizations there. As we know from the Book of Mormon, by the time that Lehi comes, the Jaredites had died out. The Olmec remained. And now the Olmec were eventually replaced or called what's called the pre-classic Maya. Now, there are some that thought, well, maybe the Olmec completely died out and the Maya were a new people. But what DNA shows us is that the DNA remained. So that if they found the same DNA from the Olmec to the Maya, so it means that that was a population that remained there. Okay. I'll give it just a second on the slide. Okay, and I'll in additional slides I'll show the evidence about the DNA remaining there. Okay, so then about 580 BC approximately, you have the Lehi's group and the Mulekites arriving in the Americas. I have the Mulekites coming in the northern part, northeastern North America, and Lehi's people coming from the southeast. That's up for question, but it's at that time the populations appear to have been separate and isolated from the Maya, the pre-classic Maya population. Okay, so the question that was brought up, how do we know that there were Mesoamericans in the Americas already when the ice people arrived? We know that through archaeological evidence and carbon dating. It shows that there were people in Mesoamerica already. Also, as I discussed, the Olmec go way back to like 1400 BC. The Olmec and the Maya shared common DNA, in particular mitochondrial DNA haplogroup A. So that shows a continued line of people in Mesoamerica. Now, it's possible that the Maya had, in addition, an influx of additional people. I don't know, but we know that the Olmec didn't completely die out. The Maya were descendants, at least in part, from the Olmec. Okay, we know from the Book of Mormon that not too long after being in the Americas, the Nephi's people split from the other children of Lehi after Lehi's died, after Lehi died. So I have the Nephites and the Lamanites splitting there in the southeast of the United States. At this time, they still haven't met with the Mulekites, who are separate and isolated. Somewhere in this time frame, there is intermixture between at least the Lamanites and the pre-classic Maya. And I'm going to point to some evidence of that. So how do we know that? How do we know that, or how do I know, or why do I believe, I should say, that some Mesoamericans joined the Lamanites early on? There's a scriptural reason and there's a scientific reason. On the scriptural side, there's evidence of a significant population growth of the Lamanites that's not otherwise well explained. There's also the indications in the Book of Mormon related to changes in appearance that were noted by the Nephites. And then also there's DNA evidence of early intermixture, and there's archaeological evidence showing cultural exchange. On the numbers part, in the Book of Mormon, in Isaiah chapter 25, when the Nephites meet with the Mulekites, and then it fight the Lamanites, it says together were less than half as numerous as the Lamanites. If you add that up, it means that the Lamanites were 4 times more numerous than the Nephites when the Nephites went to the Zarahemla. So their original numbers, if you add up that original party, when they split, they were about equal. So what's the explanation for the one population being 4 times as large as the other population within a couple of hundred years? Obviously, differences in death rates and birth rates and stuff can make a difference, but it seems logical that the Lamanites had a significant influx of other people on the Lamanite side. And that would explain the numbers difference. Okay, now many of those here will be proponents of Heartland, of the Heartland type theory. With the Heartland, that would be the Hopewell people, okay? Because when you look at who was of the Native Americans, who was in the eastern United States at the time frames of the Book of Mormon, it was the Hopewell culture. So if you go with the Heartland, you have to go with the Hopewell being the Nephites and Lamanite groups there. Now, there have been some DNA studies of the ancient Hopewell. In those DNA studies, it shows that they have DNA that overlaps with what's in the rest of America and what was in the rest of the Americas anciently. Now, the Hopewell did have a very distinct culture, and they did have some very distinct DNA signatures there, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So the Hopewell had some uniqueness DNA-wise, but they also had a lot of overlap with what was in the rest of America. So what you can imagine is that a culture that stays together, mostly most of the marriages within the group, but then enough significant overlap that you have the DNA from all over the Americas also in that Hopewell area. So despite the overlap in DNA, the Hopewell culture stayed distinct. Different diets, different agriculture, different dress, the geometric earthworks instead of the stone periods, not using the Mesoamerican art and writing, all those things are very distinct culturally. Okay, here's just an example showing the intermixture that goes throughout the Americas. The different colors represent different DNA types. All throughout the Americas, those DNA types can be found. The makeup, the mixture is different in each spot. So, like up in the Northeast, North America, the DNA mixture is different, but all of the DNA types are present, showing mixture throughout the Americas. Okay, just one note: what I said about the DNA between the Olmec and the Maya. It should be noted that the DNA testing of the ancient Olmec was very rare, but it's anyway the evidence, and there's a site there which I'll go ahead and pass over. But suffice it to say, the evidence shows that both during and after Book of Mormon time. This kind of fits what President Kimball said. So in 1971, he indicated that all Native Americans have at least some ancestry or some connection to Lehigh. So he indicated that all Native Americans have this royal blood that traces at least in part back to Lehigh. Similarly, President Hinckley, when he did the Mexico City temple dedication, he talked to the indigenous people in that area, and he indicated that most of you have your veins the blood of Father Levi as well. So that kind of fits what I indicated there, which fits the DNA evidence. Okay, so back to the model of the populating of the Americas. So around 200 BC, at this point, you have the Nephites joining the Mulekites. Again, this kind of matches the Hopewell culture for that time frame. You still have a separate Maya, pre-classic Maya culture down there. You still have small groups of hunter-gatherers that live on their own. Just like a lot of people would decide, hey, I don't want to live, with everyone else. I'd like to go hunt and live in a beautiful place I found. So you have that. So, from the Book of Mormon, we know that after Christ came, the Nephites, Lamanites, and Mulekites no longer define themselves as ites, so you have a combined, homogenous civilization. Okay, and I'll just note that we talked about in prior presentations. There's talk about the stick of Joseph and the stick of Judah, that they'll combine. This was a first minor fulfilling of that prophecy when the Nephites joined the Mulekites. The Mulekites were a stick of Judah. They were descendants of Judah. The Nephites, Lamanites were descendants of Joseph, and you have the combining of those of Judah and Joseph at that point as well. Okay, and then post Book of Mormon, what you have is the rise of the Maya civilization in Mesoamerica. You have, in particular, it spreading and dominating throughout Central America, South America, and up into the Western North America. You can see this in the spread of the Uto-Aztecan language families that come from this as they become the dominant civilization. You also see the cultural spread, for including the use of some of the Mesoamerican culture spreading into the United States. You see the use of corn, for example, replacing the diet that the Hopewell had. The Hopewell had a very different diet, a lot of seeds and stuff, much more varied, whereas the Mesoamerican diet was dominant corn. And you see that change archaeologically in the eastern United States. That kind of fits with the Book of Mormon time and how it changed after that. Okay. And so we get to where we were when you have the Europeans come and Columbus comes. So you've had the spread of the Mesoamerican civilizations, the Algonquin tribes. You have more mixture, some additional mixture with the Mesoamerican civilizations, but the Algonquin tribes do retain the primary seed, they're the primary descendants of the Hopewell and others that were there. Now, one thing you'll find with the DNA is that you will have groups, for example, the Navajo and others in the southwestern United States, their DNA will actually have significant greater match with the Algonquin tribes, but the language family is the Uto-Aztecan, which would kind of indicate the people that were sort of dominated or taken over and then adopted the language from the Mesoamericans that came up. Okay, so that's my proposed model for the populating of the Americas as informed by the Book of Mormon as I read it and the DNA evidence as I've seen it. Again, you should view it as a work in progress. We don't have complete information. We need more information, but that's what I have for now. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the DNA evidence and ask the question of, okay, well, what's Lehi's DNA? Do we still see that? When they have done testing of Native Americans, there are 3 types of DNA testing that can be done. The first is testing through the matrilineal line, through the female line. And that was the first type that was done. When they did that, they found 5 different, very distinct DNA types, and these are labeled A, B, C, D, and X. You can think of this as meaning that there were at least 5 ancestral matriarchs with distinct DNA that can still be found. All right, now of those A, B, C, D, and X, when you look at where they came from, A, B, C, and D are widely accepted to be of Asian origin, to have come from Asia, since these types are most commonly found in Asia. So many have used this to argue that Native Americans must then have all come from Asia. However, the 5th DNA type on the matrilineal side is haplogroup X. Its closest relative in the Old World is actually in the Middle East. So here are those first 4, the A, B, C, and D. And what you can see from the maps is, for example, starting with the top left with haplogroup A, it pretty clearly comes from Asia because when you look in the Old World, it's clearly an Asian DNA type because that's where it's found in the Old World. Sorry about fiddling with a microphone. What I'm trying to grab is the pointer. There we go. Okay, hopefully I didn't mess up the microphone. However, even with this, you'll see that it is found and did exist in the Old World over in that Mediterranean area. And in particular, when you look at haplogroup B, which they say, this is an Asian DNA type, but you see it's not in that Eastern Asian location where you would expect to see if that's where the Native Americans had come from. Instead of it's more of a Central Asian type, it is found over in the Mediterranean as well. And harkening back to David Hawking's talk this morning where he mentioned, Madagascar, you'll note that that's a significant down there in Madagascar, also in New Zealand, which are kind of anomalous of how they got there, right? So what you see there is a connection DNA-wise between Madagascar and Native Americans. So that kind of fits his theory there as one possibility or one solution for that. Okay, similarly with haplogroup C, again, it's clearly an Asian DNA type, which could fit some migration there, but it is also found over in that Mediterranean area. And then there's D, which again, looks like an Asian DNA type. All right, now when you go to haplogroup X, it looks very different. This is haplogroup X. So this is a documented, well-established DNA type, including found in ancient Native Americans, so they know it's authentic, ancient. When you look at where it's found mostly in the Northeast, North America, mostly with these Algonquin-speaking tribes, which again I'm proposing are the primary descendants, or at least the descendants that have the most significant concentration of DNA from the Nephites, Lamanites. When you look at where this DNA exists in the Old World, the highest concentration is in the locations that fit the Book of Mormon. All right. And I'm sure many of you are already familiar with that part of the information. Okay, so particularly in Northeast North America, many have haplogroup X. Now, some will say, okay, well, but haplogroup X isn't really from the Middle East, and that's incorrect. When you look at the closest related DNA outside of the Americas, right? If you ask the question, this DNA had to have come from somewhere. Where did it come from? Well, to figure that out, first you look at, well, where are the closest relatives, right? And the closest relatives are in the Middle East. In particular, the closest related one was found in Egypt. Okay, so for this DNA, Native Americans that have this, there are two types. One is called X2A, the other is called X2G. They're assumed that they must have obviously come over together. Well, one interesting fact is that the main type, X2A, is actually more closely related to what is found in the Middle East than it is to even the other Native American DNA type of that of X. So in other words, X2A is closer to the Middle Eastern DNA type than it is to X2G, which some other Native Americans have. So again, to me, it very obviously points to Middle Eastern origin for the X2A and X2G DNA types found in some Native Americans. In addition, not only is that the closest Middle East with the closest relatives, it's also the place where you have the most diversity. In other words, the DNA has been there the longest, you have the most mutations, and you have the highest concentrations. All of that point to that being the location for where that DNA comes from. Okay, so that was the matrilineal, the female side. Another type of DNA testing is the patrilineal, down the father's side. This can only be tested in males. It's in Y chromosome DNA testing. When they have done this kind of patrilineal testing for Native Americans, it results in three main types. Two of the three are widely accepted. Okay, yes, this is a founding DNA type for Native Americans. And those are called Y-DNA Q and C. And those look like, or at least are said to be Asian in origin. Let's take a look at those pictures. All right, so first on C, you'll see that, yeah, it looks like an Asian DNA type that kind of fits there. On the haplogroup Q, it is actually the most common throughout the Americas, the most common DNA type for Native American world is where it existed. It's really more of a Central Asian type than an Eastern Asian type. By the way, there was both migration and back migration in these areas. So the DNA for both here in Alaska and there in Siberia are actually, it's very clear they went back and forth. And then Q is found over in the Mediterranean area as well. Okay. In addition to those two, though, there was a third one that was also very common. When the scientists saw this, they did not want to accept it. So they're saying it must have all come post-Columbus. But it's actually, there is a third one. It's called Y-DNA haplogroup R, in particular R1b. The finding of this third one means that, and actually, there are a couple of subtypes too, so I say 5. But anyway, there's the DNA shows there are at least 5 ancestral patriarchs whose DNA can be identified that came to America in various migrations that you can still see their DNA for. Okay, so this third type is particularly high in Algonquin tribes. A high percentage of Native Americans in Algonquin-speaking tribes, so that would include the Ojibwe, but others as well, have this DNA type. Now, this DNA type is also common among Caucasian people. More than 10% of Jewish people have this DNA type. It was also found in ancient Egypt. For example, King Tut, who lived before Lehi's time frame, King Tut has been tested and had this DNA type. So it's a very plausible DNA type for Lehi as a potential ancestor for Native Americans. Let's take a look at where this is found. I'll note also there's one other person who has this DNA type, which is kind of interesting, and that is Joseph Smith. So, as you know, Brigham Young said that Joseph Smith was a pure Ephraimite. When Joseph Smith's DNA was tested, you may have seen some news pieces about that. That may have hit Deseret News or other things. When that was tested, they said it looks like Irish ancestry. But if you dug into the details of what was shown there, his DNA type on the Y chromosome side was R1b, which is this dominant DNA type found in Native Americans as well. So you have the possibility of it being something sort of distinctive to Joseph of Egypt, right? You have, if the Native Americans have this, you have that through potentially through Manasseh. Manasseh and Ephraim would have the same as their father Joseph, and potentially Ephraim then with Joseph Smith. R1b is very common in European populations. So this is the Y-DNA R1b in particular. So as you can see, it's very common in Western Europe, also in India, also in that Mediterranean area. And then in the Americas, you see its highest populations in that Northeast North America location as well. Okay. So as I said, when this was found, the scientists who found it said it has to be post-Columbus. It has to be European admixture. They did not want to accept it as being an authentic Native American DNA type. However, it is so common in some of the tribes in particular, and so diversely mutated already, that it really has to be a founding DNA type. In particular, if, for example, for the Ojibwe populations, actually the majority of Ojibwe males have this DNA type. And these are males who say that they have a pure Ojibwe, a pure native ancestry to the best of their knowledge, right? And they're being tested, and the majority of them are testing with this DNA type. In addition, Ojibwe have a very high percentage of the haplogroup X as well, both pointing to a very strong Israelite partial ancestry for those people. Okay, so just showing a little bit on how the diversity of it shows that it must be ancient. This is one of the studies. They looked at, these were with Algonquin tribes, and what they did is they looked at all these little points are different DNA subtypes. And they found all of these different types or little subtypes of this Y-DNA R1b among Native Americans. And the blue ones are ones that they found that, okay, those exist out in Europe, so those are pretty easy to explain as coming over from Europe. Then they found these purple ones, and there's like, well, that's multiple mutations from anything we're finding over in Europe, but maybe, you know, if you have mutations happening surprisingly quickly, maybe that you can explain that. But then you have some that have 4 or more mutations from anything that's found in Europe. It's very hard to explain that as something that has all happened since Columbus. Okay. Another thing is that when you look at the matrilineal DNA and the patrilineal DNA, particularly for this non-Asian, potentially, you know, Israelite type DNA, and you look at where do they exist, they match. It's the same populations. So here on the left is the matrilineal haplogroup X. Here on the right is the patrilineal haplogroup R. And the mainstream science will tell you that they will say, well, that haplogroup X, we think that came to America long before the Book of Mormon. That haplogroup R on the right, they say, well, we think that came after Columbus. But when you look at the two together, it's clearly the same population groups, which wouldn't have happened if they didn't come over, or at least it wouldn't expect it to happen if they didn't come over at the same time. So what this shows is that the DNA needs to be rethought, that this needs to be considered a founding DNA type, and that when they came over needs to be harmonized, which we would say fits the Book of Mormon. Okay, and then language families also kind of fit. This is where you see the Algonquin language families. It kind of fits where you see that the predominance of that DNA type. Like I said before, you also see this a fair amount down in some of the other tribes as well. Okay. There's a third type of DNA testing. I'll just do this very briefly. This is called autosomal DNA testing. What they do here is they kind of take a panorama of the DNA. They look for particular markers. And then from those markers, they can kind of associate them with populations that have those kind of DNA markers. And here they put coloring to show the associations. The blue is to denote a European, Middle Eastern, or Central Asian ancestry, the sort of Caucasian type ancestry, whereas the purple denotes more of a Eastern Asian ancestry. And when they go through the Americas, what you find is that there's a lot of the Eastern Asian type DNA markers. You do find smaller amounts of these European, Middle Eastern, or Central Asian, signals. But over here on the far left are the ones that are the Algonquin tribes, and you just see that it's a much higher concentration of that DNA type. So that's what I'm saying in terms of these have the most of the DNA, but the DNA is kind of spread throughout. Okay, so that kind of sums up the prior DNA evidence. I'll give a little bit of new insights in just a second. But in summary, we found that some DNA types do fit a Middle Eastern origin that fit the Book of Mormon. We also have corroborating evidence showing that there's at least a dual origin for Native Americans, at least dual, could be more, at least a partial Asian ancestry, a partial non-Asian ancestry. Okay, more recently with that patrilineal side, with that Y-DNA haplogroup Q. This was that sort of, the purple where it was Central Asia, but also kind of exists over in the Middle East in small parts too. Well, it turns out that there's a subtype of that is dominant in Algonquin tribes and rare outside of the Algonquin tribes. And so this kind of fits this looks like maybe somebody that was early with or stayed with that sort of Lehite, Mulekite party. So this is just a site for that. If you want a site for that, it shows how it has geography. It goes throughout the Americas, but its main location and concentration is in the eastern U.S. and seems to be associated with Algonquin groups. All right. And then this is, it's less complex than you think. Think of it like a family tree. You're all familiar with genealogy. And so this is that Y-DNA-Q DNA, and this is sort of its family tree. And what you can see from this family tree is it has locations of where the populations that have that kind of DNA are found. And so just like you and your cousins will have a little bit different DNA than maybe your distant relatives would have, you kind of have that sort of the groupings together. So take a look at this. What you find is that Native Americans in North America do kind of group together with one of these DNA subtypes. The Mesoamericans kind of group together here. South Americans group together here, a little different than Mesoamerica, but then Mesoamericans and South Americans both have this, so this kind of goes into both. And these are the dominant Native American groups. Well, when you ask the question to yourself, okay, so these are the Native American groups that have this. This is their DNA, their families and subfamilies. Where are the closest DNA types found in the Old World? And so it should be closer to them on the tree. And what you find is that the ones that are closest to Native Americans on this tree are actually one in Europe there, Central and South Asia, Europe. It's not Siberia. It's not Eastern Asia. The Siberian, Eastern Asian, and Southeast Asia occurrences of this are further away, actually. And then even in some of these, you actually find a couple of Middle Eastern and Jewish small branches that are mixed in. So this leads to the possibility that the Israelite portion, the Book of Mormon type portion, was not just a small portion of the DNA, but was actually a much more significant portion. It is this DNA type, which had been assumed to be Asian, but maybe not. Okay. There is an ancient Native American skeleton referred to as Kennewick Man. Some of the natives will refer to him as the Ancient One. It was a very well preserved Native American skeleton in Washington State near the Columbia River. Commonly, it's said that the carbon dating calls him older than Book of Mormon timeframes, but there are some carbon dates that would place him in Book of Mormon timeframes. I've done YouTube videos on that. If you're interested on that, it's on the Uncovering Lamanite History YouTube channel. But Kennewick Man helps pull this together as well, because Kennewick Man is this mitochondrial DNA X2A, this Middle Eastern type. His Y DNA type is that Q type. And then his DNA, his sort of non-Asian physical appearance, and the carbon dating all kind of connect him potentially to the Book of Mormon. All right. And I wrote a book called Face of a Nephite that goes into the DNA evidence and talks about him as well in particular. Okay, so if you take these DNA types and you kind of plug them in, then what you have, I think, is these are DNA types that are Mesoamerican in origin. These are DNA types that were sort of Northeast North American. I would call them Book of Mormon populations in origin. And then what you have is a significant mixture in particular where it ends up matching throughout, spreading throughout the Americas. So that's how I see it. There is some additional DNA type with the Aleutians that I think is separate. Okay, and that wraps it up. So in summary, the scientific support is growing for a separate, different ancestral migration in Native American history. It's not just an Asian Mesoamerican ancestry. That's a significant change from the previous understandings about Native American ancestry. Again, we need additional information. This is all a work in progress. But it's a critical step to validating the Book of Mormon and helping to understand Native ancestry, and we hope to learn more. And then those are some of the key takeaway points in terms of the particular DNA types we're looking at, the evidence of the mixture, and again, the support for the Book of Mormon. All right, and that's it. Thank you.
Oh, go. I got something. We need to start announcing our next 100 days, our contest that we're doing.
Oh, yes.
Okay. So we are rolling out something fun to get our community involved. And we are going to be giving away $1,000 American, clarify, $1,000 cash to the Zion Media fan subscriber that recommends the best guest, like a future Lance, a future Alex Boyer. We're looking for somebody that is, faith-based, or they could be a sports figure, politics, culture, anyone that you guys think, I want that person on Zion Media. Or if you're watching this yourself and you're being like, I want to be on Zion Media, you could win yourself $1,000. What we're going to do is over the next 100 days, we are going to open up our link tree, and there's going to be a Google form if you go in there, and it's going to be a place where you can click on it. You can go in there and fill out your information. You can fill out information on who the guest is, why you think they would be a great guest for Zion Media. And then we want you to either take out your phone and record yourself and give us a little explanation of why this person would be perfect for Zion Media as a guest, or do an audio. We don't need a video, but we just want to hear it more. It's a lot easier to perceive what your intention is versus just clickety-clicking on that. So how it's going to work is we're going to filter those in. We're going to go through them, scrub them, the ones that we like. We're going to reach out, contact, do a little pre-interview, see if they're podcast worthy, and then we're going to platform them. We're going to put them on the show. And as we put these on, once we get 2 or 3 people on, we're going to open our socials up for voting, where you as the fans are going to help us determine who is the best guest. Over the course of the 100 days, whoever is voted in as the best guest, it's kind of a 50-50 criteria. We believe it. And then the votes will determine who the winner is for the $1,000. And 100 days from now, before December 21st, we're going to get that $1,000 out. Someone will have some Christmas spending cash or some personal cash. So
Trevor, quick question. If I recommend, you guys should have Sylvester Stallone on your program, they need to introduce us to Sylvester Stallone.
You got to be able to
just recommend somebody, and then it's like, not only do you recommend either yourself or somebody else, you got to bring them to the table.
Yep, you got to be the connector in chief.
If they know Tucker Carlson or someone big or like Elon Musk, they'd have to give us their number. Right.
Well, not only just give us their number, we want to call and be like, hey, David gave me your number. They need to make the connection. They need to help platform them.
Put us on a text thread. Put us on an email thread. You've got to be the connector in order to qualify.
Exactly.
I hope they call me to Zion's mission.
Listen, here's the thing. I met with Lance Weaver and his wife just a few days ago, took him to lunch. He's like, Shane, we need to go to Monte Alban. You need to get Trevor. Trevor needs to find him a date. So if you're available and you're interested in maybe going to Monte Alban, send a picture and a screenshot of your best picture to Trevor. He's looking through to decide he's single and available. So he's got to take a date. And he said, grab David and his wife. And I just said, you know what? David probably isn't in a financial position to go. So for those of you who want to help David Douglas and his wife go to Monte Alban and go to Mexico, you can donate. David's going to flash up his personal Cash App. And you can help David go to Monte Alban. We're going to record it, so you'll get some great content from it. Monte Alban.
David's going to get money and I'm going to get women?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's what we do here at Buying Media.
And our viewers are going to get a video out of it.
And our viewers get a video out of this. Monte Alban, if you don't know, is a mountain that has been cut off at the top. And it is believed by Lance and actually by me that is the temple Nephi built. And we're going to go to that site. It's in, what's it by?
Oaxaca?
Oaxaca? I don't know. But anyways, help David Douglas. My guess is it's going to cost somewhere between $4,000 to $5,000 for him and his wife. So help us raise some money from now. We're planning a trip in November. Help us raise some money to get David Douglas, because we need somebody to be behind the camera, on the camera, recording things, and
nothing will be filmed if
you and I go. There will be nothing filmed, and we'll talk about it. But you want to see this thing? It's incredible. This mountain and this temple site, remnants on the mountain.
It looks like aliens cut off the top of the mountain.
It does.
Who has that?
It does. So, David Douglas's Cash App, there it is. He's already put it on there. Let's see, all you Zion Media family, please help us out. Let's get him to be able to come on with us to Monte Alban. Maybe Mike Rigby, maybe you should come with us too, man.
Well,
that'd be fun.
we shall see. That's fine.